webinar. This session is made possible today through support from the New Jersey Recovery Fund, including the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation and the Community Foundation of New Jersey. For those who are unfamiliar with the Citizens Campaign, we're a New Jersey-based nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering citizens to be community problem solvers and to get results. And we thought with the news that the state of New Jersey is hosting 3 public forums next week on the New Jersey Sandy Action Plan, we thought this would be a great time to educate people about the opportunities to give input and to gain insight from what the state's leading public policy experts are saying, and hopefully help you craft better testimony in the coming weeks. My name is Heather Taylor. I am the Senior Director of Communications and Public Affairs for the Citizens Campaign. I'll be moderating today's session. We are also joined by Kevin Walsh.
Hello.
The Executive Director of the Fair Share Housing Center, and Stacey McCormick. The Director of Government Affairs for the American Littoral Society, and Nina Arst, the Media Coordinator for the Housing and Community Network of New Jersey.
Hi.
Hi. So one second, There we go. Oops. There we go. I wanted to give you guys a list of who we have here. Just a reminder, the public has been invited to offer testimony at one of 3 public hearings next week, Tuesday, February 11th from 4 to 7 at Richard Stockton College, Wednesday, February 12th from 5:30 to 8:30 at New Jersey Institute of Technology, Thursday, February 13th from 4 to 7 p.m. at Brookdale Community College. If you have not already signed up, please do so. There are limited spots. You may also submit written testimony by March 5th. So anyone that has not registered, please do. This is a great opportunity for you to educate the legislators and the policymakers about the impact that their decisions are making, specifically with how money is going to be allocated, what are going to be the priorities in the recovery effort. So right now, we're just going to quickly walk you through some steps on getting ready for next week. So first time, I can't stress it enough, sign up ahead of time. There are limited spots, and you're only going to have 3 minutes. So in those 3 minutes, you're going to need to prepare a statement. I always like to lead with a compliment, a smile. We know that you want to tell your personal story of what's happening in your community, how those residents have been impacted. When you start thinking about what you're going to write, remember that the best opinions are rooted in facts. You're going to want to make sure that you can build your case for why certain neighborhoods need more attention than others, why we need affordable housing built in certain areas, why certain towns need more money to do some sort of flood prevention or hazard mitigation. You're going to be needing to base your argument or your story in facts, and it will go a long way. You also want to be no blame. What this means is that you don't make any personal attacks on those people that are on the panel next week, as much as you might want to. You do not want to attack anyone's personal character or their motivations. It's the quickest way to lose your audience is to start making attacks. And ultimately, they're just going to turn off and not listen to you. But if you can treat them with respect, show some signs that they are trying to meet you and help the public, then you're going to go a long way. I always start when I go up to a presentation, sort of lead with a compliment, give them some sort of credit for doing something. If they gave money in the last round of hearings, thank them for giving my town X amount of money. If you have nothing nice to say, just say thank you for letting me have this opportunity to speak today. The next thing you want to do is after you've written your testimony and you've put down your facts, you have what you want to say, you need to read it over and over again and time yourself. You are only going to have 3 minutes, and they will cut you off if you don't hit it. So make sure you get everything included in those 3 minutes. You're also going to make sure you have lots of photocopies of your statement to hand out to the press or the attendees. Now, I mentioned getting fact-based research. I wanted to highlight some of those areas where you could get numbers and data. The Star Ledger has the Sandy scorecard on NJ.com. It is a great resource to see what money has come in, what building permits have been released. It's by a city-by-city basis, so you can really get some good information from there. Also visit NJ Spotlight. They are data-driven reporting and maps. Those maps, you can hone in on what your town has received in money or in housing and permits. Again, it's really great information if you go to NJ Spotlight. And also the New Jersey State Comptroller's Office. They are tracking all the money and how it's been spent already. So you can get some really good information analysis to help support any of your testimony when you're making your presentation. And now at the public hearing. Dress respectfully, dress professionally. You want to show that you mean business when you get there. And you want to arrive 15 minutes early. It gives you a good time to get a lay of the land and allows you time to introduce yourself to reporters and to give them a copy of your testimony. And this is important because reporters have their own deadlines. You don't know when they're going to pick up and leave and walk out of that public hearing. They might only be there for a half hour to hear the presentations by the state. So you make sure you get there early before their attention is focused on the hearing. You hand them a copy of your testimony. Make sure your name is on it, contact information. I would maybe even put you like a Twitter handle, so if they want, they could tweet at you like so-and-so has just testified at this hearing that their town needs more money. So yes, arrive early, introduce yourself to reporters, make sure they get a call. Pay attention to the other speakers. This is important because a lot of times this hearing is going on for 3 hours. The chair or whoever's monitoring this is going to start cutting people off if people start repeating the same statements. So you need to be paying attention. Make sure that if they are hurrying people along, you can on the spot edit your testimony so that you get to the main points without duplicating what others have said. If you think about this in advance, maybe underline what are the most important parts that you want to convey to the speakers. And know that your testimony in full will be submitted in writing. You just might not get to say everything that you wanted to. After the presentation, if you're not able to speak, you can hand it in. People can give up to March 5th to turn in their testimony. I would encourage, if you think that there are voices that are not heard when you're there, if you think there is more opportunity to educate our officials, then to go out there and spread the word. Give a copy of your testimony to your state senator and assembly representatives. Oops, sorry. So yeah, other ways you can help spread the word. Write a blog post on your local news site or write a letter to the editor about your experience. So right now it's sort of a tight crunch. We only have 4 days, I believe, till the first hearing on Tuesday. So it might be hard to get an actual letter in the paper, but you could try. Online news is instantaneous. Also, Facebook and Twitter are a great way to get word out. But also go to the hearing, observe what you see, and let your community know what was said at these hearings. And finally, help your neighbors submit their own testimony, especially if you think of senior citizens who might not be as tech savvy or displaced homeowners who don't have a computer at where they're staying, and so forth. So that is, in a nutshell, just a sort of preview for next week. I want to turn it over to our experts who really know this plan and can give some guidance on what's in it. Because that's the next part of making an informed testimony, is understanding what is in the current plan and how do we want to see it improved. So I'd like to first introduce Nina Arsh, the media coordinator for the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey. Nina?
Thanks. A lot of great tips there, and I just wanted to add that for the copy that you're bringing to read from, it would be really helpful for you if you double-spaced it and used a large font. That way it's easy for you to read. And that only has to be on your copy that you're reading from, not the copies you provide to others, obviously. It's just very helpful. And remember to breathe. Yeah, I know you get nervous when you're speaking in front of people, but when you breathe, you can think a little bit more clearly and people will understand you better instead of you rushing through the testimony. So now I'm going to go over what the Housing Community Development Network has found in the plan, and definitely Kevin can back me up on this. Kevin's very familiar with what exactly is in it, so please interject at any time. But what we were looking at starts on page 40 of the PDF, or section 3, which is the method of distribution. And one thing we saw was, well, the plan itself, it's builds off the framework that was used for distributing the nearly $1.83 billion in community development block grants that New Jersey initially received from HUD last spring. In this new round, we saw that there's $245 million that would go towards rental housing and renters, including an additional $200 million for multifamily housing development, $20 million for grants that fund the rehabilitation or reuse of abandoned or foreclosed homes and lots to fend off blight, and $20 million for neighborhood enhancement grants, $25 million for special needs housing, and $10 million for the demolition of dilapidated homes. One thing that we took issue with was that in this plan, under the $200 million for multifamily housing development, they removed a prior plan requirement that targets funds to the areas most impacted by the storm, which now that's how we saw that these developments in New Brunswick and Belleville that we heard about in the news recently were financed through. So we need to make sure that these funds are going to the areas that were most impacted and need it most. And that's something that we as a network will be commenting on. We also found that the plan only provides 30% of funding to renters, although 40% of damage was to renters. There's still not enough money to help low-income renters who are struggling now. And $260 million is allocated for rental assistance programs between the second plan and another amendment filed by DCA. However, only $15 million is going to renter vouchers through the separate amendment request. So definitely not enough for renters and not enough for low-income people. The plan, as it is now, does not commit the required 50% of funds be directed to low and moderate income households. Let's see here. We also found that the plan would put $490 million into homeowner assistance programs. The reconstruction, rehabilitation, elevation, and mitigation, or more commonly known as RREM program, has been criticized by many residents for the long delays and the lack of communication. That program is going to receive an extra $390 million. That funding would provide grants to about 3,000 homeowners, according to the plan, while that's not enough to cover everybody that's on the wait list. So any new applications would not be accepted. Now, the firm that was handling this contract, and Kevin can definitely talk more about this, the Hammerman and Gaynor Incorporated, or HGI, they were quietly terminated by the state, and they were the ones who were handling programs such as RREM. So the plan does not make clear how this is going to run, who's going to be running the show, and how are people going to get the help they need. Another thing we took issue with was that in this plan that just came out, the state wants to use $5 million for a 2014 tourism campaign after spending $25 million last year. You'll remember the Stronger Than the Storm campaign received a lot of criticism. Didn't provide the help that people needed, any kind of contact information. So that's something that we are taking issue with as well. And that's about it.
Great. Thank you, Nina. Kevin Walsh from the Fair Share Housing Center, would you like to go next and weigh in?
Sure. So I think Nina gave a great overview there, and just a few points that I would like to touch on is both how sort of I'll structure my remarks both sort of sharing some initial thoughts about the plan, and then sharing some advocacy points that my organization, Fair Share Housing Center, intends to make. You can get information about Fair Share Housing Center and our Sandy efforts at fairsharehousing.org/Sandy. where we also have a blog there. Much of what's on our blog related to Sandy is on the main Sandy page I just mentioned, but there's also then information on our blog that doesn't necessarily make it onto the Sandy page there too, where we've analyzed some of the problems, and it's always important also to suggest solutions, which is what I think is an important part of any testimony that people give. As Nina mentioned, the funding, the action plan that was proposed and is out for comment until March 5th, provides more money for housing, provides some new money that wasn't previously in place to a substantial degree for infrastructure, and then has, the way we've sort of laid it out, a category of other. And the housing money is about $500 million roughly towards homeowners, about $200 million towards renters, which is not proportionate to the homeowner-renter proportion of damage, and is something we've been pushing for a long time, along with others. It was something that HUD initially recognized, but it recently approved a shift of over $100 million towards homeowners from small business without providing an additional amount for renters. Renters are disproportionately lower income, so although we know homeowners need it, and we're certainly trying to be supportive of homeowners as well, we're especially sensitive to the needs of renters, and disappointed that the state has again proposed to undermeet their needs, at least proportionate to the extent of damage. There's then about $535 million that is going to infrastructure, and I know that others on the call will speak to that. That's a substantial amount of money. It was rumored for a while that there wouldn't be any going to infrastructure. It was also rumored that there wouldn't be any would be going to housing, and so I think it's helpful that there's a decent amount going to protect against future storms, and I'll leave to others to comment on that. There's almost $100 million going in towards essential services, which is helping towns that really have lost their tax bases. $10 million going to demolish unsafe buildings, and then various other categories which make up about $200 million. So the way it divides up is about $70 million towards housing, about $700 million towards housing, about $500 million towards infrastructure, and about $200 million in other categories. It is the way it will work. If people think that there should be some need that is not proposed to be met in this, or more money than has been allocated, or different amounts, or it's spent in different priorities, that should go in the comments. And just the way the comment process works is that the state has to respond to the comments. And previously it seemed people, including myself and my organization, we were disappointed at the way that the state failed to respond meaningfully to the comments that were made, and HUD actually required the state to go back and address in greater detail some of the comments that were made. And so we're hopeful this time, with a longer period for comments, and HUD making clear that it expects the state to respond, that each comment that is made either individually or collectively will be responded to. And the one point that I would add to the earlier points about preparing testimony is that I think it's really important to sort of conclude with the thrust of your points, because what you want to do is to make sure that they write down something that you say, because that's what they'll be responding to. And so, one way to do that would be to say, I want the state to respond to this question, why did the state require floodplain manager letters when New York State and New York City did not require floodplain management letters? It's important, I think, both to speak in and to provide details, but at the same time, it's important to get across your primary point. And I think it's fair game to ask them to respond to specific comments or to specific questions. And as I understand it, these hearings will be either recorded or transcribed. And so if somebody asks a question that is not responded to, it's then fair game to say back to HUD, they did not consider my comment, they did not respond to my comment. The other thing I would say along with testifying is that when you hand your testimony in, it would also be fair game, I think, to send testimony to elected representatives. There are a few members of Congress who have been upfront on this, and if it's the sort of thing where you can put your testimony online and tweet it around or put it on Facebook, I think that one of the great parts of the Sandy conversations that have occurred as people debate what's gone wrong and how to improve it is that there's somewhat of a social media online conversation that occurs that media is observing. You know, I'm often surprised and happy when I see people who are directly impacted by the storm talking about it and media picking up on that. I know for our purposes we get a lot of reporters calling who are looking to talk with people who are impacted by the storm. We set up a phone number and a website. 866-SANDY-60 is our toll-free number where people can call and tell our stories, and then one of the things we can do is connect them up with reporters, which we found has been helpful to give a human face to what's happening. A couple of issues, and then I'll finish, and we can move on from my part. One of the things that we've noticed and that we've heard, and I think that would be helpful for people to comment on, is to the extent to which there's been confusion around the administration of the various programs. We really think that there's been fairly widespread failure to observe people's rights when they deal with government, basic due process about what rules we're all playing by, what's the data, how is the government making its decisions whether to give money to certain people or not. And it's just completely unfair when government makes decisions but the people who have been denied money don't know why those decisions were made. And so I think it's really fair for people, and would urge people to consider demanding that the government, that the state be more transparent when it makes its decisions. One of the other things is that it should be clear what rules and what data where the state is using. We just released a report 2 days ago that 80% of the people who were denied funding when they applied for it in the RREM and the resettlement programs, that 80% of them, when they appealed, were found to be eligible. And so there was an 80% error rate. And there's thousands of people who didn't appeal, and there's no reason, I think, to think that those people would have had any less success in filing their appeals. One of the things we've heard is that a lot of people just gave up, or a lot of people didn't have access to people who could help them understand the process. There is no housing, unlike New York City, New York State, there are no housing counselors in New Jersey that have been directly funded for purpose of helping people find housing. While there's some help being provided, there's not enough for people to navigate these systems. And so there's thousands of people who are right now, if you listen to the state, have no chance of getting funding, even though the state has acknowledged that it made mistakes in how it evaluated people's applications. We think that's unfair, and we think the state should have to go back and reanalyze those applications so that people who are entitled to a chance to get funding are given a chance, rather than losing their opportunity because of mistakes that were made by the state. The final point to make is that there's been a lot of concern expressed to us about people who, by the media, it's been in the media certainly, and it's played out, and it's a point that Nina made as well about the funds not going to the places that were hardest hit. And we found it really curious and somewhat strange that the state removed the provision from its plan that said that areas that have the greatest need are the places that are going to be the emphasis of the efforts. There is a requirement under the law that 80% of the funds go to places that were hardest hit, and although there's value in our view in increasing the rental stock, there have been, throughout the state where it can happen, that is often blocked by towns that don't want affordable housing in their or rental housing within their boundaries, which includes some of the towns that have been impacted by the storm. And so that's something that the state needs to overcome. If towns are acting unreasonably and blocking housing from being built that's needed, that is something that the state can and should overcome. And in addition to that, it's certainly disturbing when you see that political favoritism, as alleged by the media, could play a role in this. And so one other thing that people could demand is more objective criteria for determining where funds that are going to developers are spent and where they're not going to be spent. That concludes my 2 cents in all this, and I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kevin. Stacy, you want to tell us about your own thoughts on this?
Sure. Stacy McCormick from American Littoral Society, and we're a coastal conservation organization. So I'm only really going to speak to the Blue Acres buyout program and a little bit about planning and infrastructure, which isn't really my strong suit, but it kind of overlaps. Just like I think the other 2 speakers had said, there's a lot of questions that this plan leaves us with. For starters, let me go back. Let me just a little bit about the Blue Acres program. It's the buyout program through DEP, and the purpose of it is to move people out of harm's way and create open space that would help with future storm surge, habitat restoration. There's a whole host of reasons to do the Blue Acres program and participate in it. And it's also it's linked with the open space initiatives, which I'm sure a lot of you are following, is also, there's no more money left. So specific to the Blue Acres program, and then eventually the sort of becoming green acres, this is really important for future floods and moving people out of harm's way for the next storm, which we all know is coming regardless of whether the administration believes in climate change. So there's $100 million allocated from this plan for the Blue Acres buyout, and there's other dollars coming in for the program as well. But the first criticism that I had come across in here is that throughout the document it talks about the state has collected data and surveys and community assessments, and they've done mapping, and they've got all of this information on storm surge and repetitive loss and areas of vulnerability and flooding, and we've never seen it. No one has ever seen it, and from our perspective, we want to see it for a number of reasons. Obviously, to inform towns to make decisions where they should be putting infrastructure, where they should be putting housing, where they should be doing strategic buyouts for habitat restoration for future storm surge, and to move people out of harm's way. I mean, we don't even know where people are living who are directly in danger now. This plan indicates that the state will use its own discretion. Despite all of the information that they claim they've gathered, DEP has refused to release it. You can't find it on any of the websites. And then the Blue Acres program just says that the state will use their own discretion to choose the buyout areas. Similar to what Kevin was saying, there's all this information, but we're not necessarily targeting the places that are the most vulnerable or who have had the biggest impact. They also indicate that they're going to use predefined areas, again, based on what formula, based on what data sets. They have this stuff now, they're claiming, but we haven't seen any strategic decision making. And in a forward-thinking way, you're not providing the towns this information. So in the infrastructure improvements and in all of the reconstruction, are you making those decisions based on the information that you've gathered? So we're not sure if communities are able to plan now based on information gathered post-Sandy. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're just putting things right back where they were. We're going to rebuild, placing infrastructure right back in the places where it's going to be destroyed again. Also, I just want to make a note on the climate change comments. The plan does the minimum as far as I can tell. I think a lot of different organizations are reading it in a bunch of different ways. I don't think that they have done their best, but it sounds like they have, checkboxed, okay, we're going to use the sea level rise tool, but the words climate change are not in this plan. So they don't speak to it directly, and it is a requirement of HUD. So if folks want to talk about that, I wouldn't get into the details of it because, as I was reading through it, not to give too much, room for them to get out of it, but it looks like some requirements are met, but they're certainly not addressing the intent. The intent is that you're going to, you're going to accept climate change and plan for it. So I don't necessarily see that in this document. I'm just trying to think of a couple other things. Just some comments too. We talked a lot about preparing for your testimony, and I absolutely agree. As a person who has just recently started testifying, print out your stuff, big, bold, highlight, use colors. If you have to, write into your testimony, plan for it to change. I always bring like a colored pen and kind of make edits in my testimony as the day goes on. Like Heather had said, you don't want to hear the same comments over and over again, and they will just stop you. But also, I find it very helpful to put my contact information on my testimony and any other copies you have of your testimony, so that if you hand it out to the press, they can get back to you or they can clarify some statements. The worst thing is to be misquoted. So you want to make sure that the press has a contact information along with your comments. And finally, and specific to my area, we want to propose the state should do this, the state should do this, the state should do this. So in the case of the Blue Acres program or any of the conservation initiatives, we want to make sure that the state actually does use this information that they gather to make decisions. We want to make sure that they aren't putting infrastructure back. In our case, we want them to avoid beaches and dunes and high hazard areas, places of repetitive damage. We want them to use nature-based solutions when they're reconstructing areas, not just berms and walls and sort of the hard construction areas. So, and I'm happy to help people, craft some of that language, but try to end also on the things that the state should be doing, so that then the legislators or whoever's in the room, I don't know who's going to be there, have tangible things to walk away with, because it does get exhausting, I'm sure, for them to listen to hours and hours of testimony of, well, this went wrong, and this, and this, and this, and this, but it's really helpful to come in with, and this is what you should do, and this is what you should do, and this is what you should do, and again, then they can follow up with the particular people that made those comments, so that there's somewhere to go after that testimony with the comments or the press comments or your suggestions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Stacey. That was, and I really do thank you, Kevin and Nina, too. And that fact that HUD is directing the state has to respond to certain comments, it's really powerful information, I think, if they do follow your advice and really direct for either a state response or the state should be doing this. I think that calls attention to what hopefully would be a response back from the state. So I think that is really great. And we do have a couple questions, and people still listening, please feel free to pose your questions through the chat feature on the side or the questions box on the side. But one of the questions that even I had this yesterday was, who will be on the panel that is hearing our testimony? And that is, I think, a good question. I think the answer is some represents from DCA, but I'm not sure. Kevin, Nina, do any of you know that answer specifically, or what should someone expect when they go to one of these public hearings? I know there will be transcribers, but are there going to be official state representatives there?
I think so. I would expect that there would be, but in the past, people haven't really, the administration has not attended legislative hearings with any frequency on Sandy. So I think it's hard to say. It could be, I think that they in theory could satisfy their legal obligation by simply having somebody there who could be a lower level employee. I would hope that they wouldn't do that. I don't know what the language in the notice says. I would expect those hopefully as a matter of giving people access to the decision makers and the people who really need to both hear and see the passion some folks may bring, I would expect that there will be, like the DCA commissioner, for Mark Ferzan. Who knows? Maybe the governor will show up. And you know, but I think we'll probably not know until we arrive.
I just want to add to that. For folks, I mean, as the hearings go on, I think sometimes people get more and more comfortable saying something. So comment on that. You know, if you're there and there's no one there who's in a decision-making position, there's clearly no one paying attention. HUD is paying attention to the rollout, and I think it's important to even just note that in your testimony. Testimonies are going to be recorded. Here's who's not here again. Here is who, you know. So that itself in process is important to note too.
I'd like to add, there was a notice that came out today that the governor is holding a town hall meeting in Middletown the same day as the hearing in Middletown. But the town hall is going to be at 11 o'clock, and they're going to have a mobile cabinet at 12:30. So my guess is he's not going to be in Middletown all day, so I wouldn't expect him at that evening's hearing.
Is that open, I guess, is that invite only, or is that open to the public too, that town hall at 11 o'clock?
It says it's open to the public. Seating is on a first-come, first-served basis.
Okay. Someone could hand out their testimony there too, just to make sure
Yeah.
it gets delivered to the right people.
That.
Another question is, can we comment on the amendments to the current plan? I guess that was from round one. I believe that would be closed, right? But you could probably reference the previous plan in this plan, right? By that.
You know, there have been actually 6 amendments. Some of them are fairly minor, and they haven't done too much on them. But there have been 6 amendments prior to the current one. I don't actually know if they've all been approved. I know the one we were most concerned about was approved. But I think it's all fair game. I don't think they're going to stop you from saying anything. I think you need to. It's why, you know, it's important to be prudent with your time, because they're probably going to enforce that. But it strikes me anything involving Sandy recovery is fair game. And you know, I would also say that there is probably going to, you know, it may be wasted, because if it's already done, it's done. But I don't think they're going to shut you down if you talk on that.
Okay. Another question just came in. On a related side topic, has anyone looked into how well the Hurricane Sandy New Jersey Relief Fund has done with allocating money to towns and services most in need?
We've looked at that from a rental standpoint, as I know the Housing Community Development Network has somewhat as well, and it's really, really bad for renters. There's a lot of money going to Newark, which has some damage, but not certainly the lion's share, and a lot of it going to Mercer County, strangely, for renters, but little of that, but none, very little going to, for instance, Ocean and Monmouth. And so and the state, you know, has acknowledged that. They don't dispute that that's where the money is gone. The Star-Ledger, an article by Ted Sherman a month or so ago covered it. So it is, that is a concern. Other geographic parts of it are, you know, I think that some of the data on that is, as best I can tell, still being developed.
And I think if someone visits NJ Spotlight or the Sandy Scorecard, you can also see where a lot of the money has been going already, and also the New Jersey State Comptroller's Office. They all have different chart plans that you can download and look at and see where the money has been going to.
And one thing to note on that is and this was actually in New Jersey Spotlight this morning, incredibly, just 4% of the RREM money, $600 million pot, just $25 million of it, has actually been transferred from the state's bank to people's banks. You know, they may in theory have an award, but only 4% of the money has actually moved, which is, you know, when you hear people, when you talk to people when I've talked to people who have been directly impacted, and you're in a room of 100 people and you ask who has gotten money, and nobody raises their hand, it always seemed to me like, well, this must just be an oddball group of people. How could so many people, when you hear them saying about how much money has been approved, and the reason is because, that wasn't odd. That's actually, lots of people have in theory been awarded money, but they actually haven't gotten any of the money yet. At least on the biggest program, which I think now has been approved to nearly $800 million.
Wow. Any final, that was it for the questions right now, unless anyone wants to chime in who is viewing this from home. Any final thoughts or from our panelists? Oh, wait, I got I got one question. In our last meeting with Gore, I believe that's the Governor's Office of, I say, Recovery and Resiliency, they indicated the panel would consist of representatives from each of the affected departments, DOT, DEP, Economic Development Authority, and each of them would make a short presentation at the beginning of the hearing. Collectively, this will be 30 minutes of the intro remarks before testimony is taken. Do any of you know anything more further about these presentations that will be made? No?
No.
I think that was in the press release. I think it did mention that there would be presentations given. So hopefully that'd be another opportunity if there are these high-ranking officials, or maybe not high-ranking, but employees of these departments. You could also give copies of your testimony to those individuals and listen to see what they're saying. And definitely, again, I want to stress that take your written testimony. You could use online media to post it. You could post it as a note on Facebook and share it with your friends. You could post it on your local local news sites. Patch sites are still, they have message boards that you can post things to. Email it out to your friends. Put in there, a link to where someone could submit comment up till March 5th. This is really about getting the word out and empowering your neighbors to be able to direct resources to your community and directing resources to those people who are being underserved currently. I want to thank our speakers today, and on the screen you should be able to see their websites. Please check them out. As they mentioned, they've issued statements, they've issued reports that look at these issues. Kevin Walsh from fairsharehousing.org, Stacy McCormick from littoralsociety.org, and Nina Arst from hcdnnj.org. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Oh, wait. Would this be an appropriate time to bring up the issue of FEMA data to correct RREM funding? Any of our speakers want to take that?
Yeah, and that's involved with some of the stuff we came out with a couple days ago. The state has said that RREM data, that the decisions that RREM awards were, that the awards were based on, was flawed. And it went back and it corrected it. And the state blames FEMA. And FEMA just today in the Wall Street Journal and maybe one other two places said, come on, everyone knew that. We told you that. And we told New York that. And if you go to New York's plan acknowledges that the data was just for sort of a snapshot involving immediate needs, not long-term needs. And so, it's pretty astounding that you hire high-paid firms that pitch their expertise and ability to hit the ground running right away to come in and run these programs, and that they could make what, in the disaster recovery field seems like a pretty amateurish mistake to simply use the wrong data. When, if somebody had bothered to call, given them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't know, if they just bothered to call FEMA and ask about the limitations of the data, it could have been corrected. So it's really a dispiriting development.
Wow. All right, final call on questions before we let our guests go and get.
I want to add that if by some chance you don't have the opportunity to testify, that time runs out, or you can't complete your testimony, don't get discouraged. There's a lot of ways to get your message out there. You know, as you said earlier in the webinar, write letters to your local newspaper, give a reporter a call or a quick email, blog about it. Be vocal. Be vocal. This is not your only opportunity to get out there and share your story.
That's great. And, you know, what about, is there a role for, this is a hearing for the state departments. I'm assuming there'll be more opportunities with the legislature, or people can share their testimony to the legislators. You know, what role will there be with the Senate and Assembly in this, if any?
Well, I know Senator Sweeney's office is going to be doing a Sandy Bill of Rights tour in the following week. More information on that will be coming soon, but that'll be another opportunity to be heard. And as you said earlier, send a copy of your testimony to your legislator. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I also think that if people sort of, you know, there are some grassroots groups out there that have developed that have strong voices, and people are connecting with them. If there are people, one of the things I've observed is a lot of people who have been impacted by the storm are hesitant, and you know, people are very often in general hesitant to engage in the public realm. But if there are people who really want to, who are animated, and there are some folks out there to advocate for themselves and their neighbors, there's a place for it. And it's not just these hearings. I mean, you could, the media is really all over these issues, and are looking for people to raise up issues and put you know, provide a narrative. And you know what I think would be good too is if there's success stories, it would be great, because a lot of what's going on here is criticism, and it's legitimate criticism, and we're not going to let up on the criticism because it's needed to correct these things. At the same time, if there's things that are going well, it'd be great to hear those stories as well. And even though my sense is there are less of them, I think we need some of them so that we can, to some extent, you know, be mindful that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
I just want to add
really great point.
I just want to add also, I can't speak for everyone, but I know I testify on a lot of different bills related to Sandy. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, you know, and let me know some of your concerns, I can just kind of keep you in mind when things come up. It's great for us. I mean, people who go and lobby generally, to have someone come up with me. I mean, I could always invite you to come to a hearing on a bill that's proposed about, you know, a whole number of things. There's a ton of bills out there right now that we're all working on directly with the legislators or the sponsors. But when it comes time to testify on the bill, we can invite you to come with us. We can prep you. I mean, I can. I know. I'm guessing everyone can. You know, it's always great to bring somebody, a resident, along who can speak directly to the issue.
That's great. Yeah, and I invite anyone, if they do submit testimony, you know, you can send it to these other nonprofit groups, not just the legislators, but it's good for our organizations, too, to be aware of what are people saying. It will be a public record, but it's great to know if you have to educate the groups or your allies on this so we can be more informed and share your story with other people. I know I constantly want to promote, you know, how Sandy funding, how these state actions, how they're impacting the community, and share that story with other people. And I think that's it, and we're almost, oh no, it's been 50 minutes. But again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. The session has been recorded and will be available